Welcome to Critical Role Demystified, Episode 5. This is where I watch an episode of Critical Role and we break down what lessons we can learn from it as players and dungeon masters. This time we're talking about the 5th episode of the Vox Machina campaign, The Trick About Falling. The cast is all here except for Sam, who was at work, so Scanlan is not terribly active this time around. The episode opens with the duergar mostly dead except for the general. I'm actually not sure that's how the previous episode had ended, but it's fine. The party interrogates the general at knife point, and he tells them that Lady Kima was taken to the Emberhold, a duergar fortress surrounded by flowing lava. If she's alive, that's where they'll find her. Clarota, the exiled mind flayer that the party is traveling with, probes the general's mind for information, psychically torturing him. The party, having learned their lesson from Episode 3's failed interrogation, offers to let the general go if he will give them the information they're looking for, including more information about K'varn. The general hasn't seen K'varn, but he knows a couple things about him. He knows that he's brilliant, he knows that he doesn't need to walk upon the earth, he sees all, smiles from a toothy maw, laughs in the darkness, and has a single black gnarled horn brimming with evil black arcane energy emerging from the center of his forehead, and that horn is the source of K'varn's power. He also does tell them about a secret tunnel hidden behind a lava flow. However, one thing that happens in this interrogation is that the party keeps saying they are going to take the general's weapons and armor before they let him leave alive. And the general keeps saying, no, you have to let me leave unspoiled. And neither side acknowledges that they mean very different things. So after the general gives the information, when he insists he should be allowed to keep his weapons and armor, well, you've already told them what they wanted to know. Sorry, dude. You should have been better at negotiating. So when the general realizes the deal is not going his way, he turns invisible and starts to run away. And he makes it about 20 feet before he is frozen in place by Clarota. And then Clarota feeds.
He is there standing in place with his arms locked like this.
Oh, Clarota.
As he's frozen in place, Clarota just kind of steps up to the front of him, grabs his cheeks and pulls his head in towards him as his tendrils slowly wrap around his head. You can see the meat at the back of his skull, and with this horrible crunching sound, you see his head shudder as his limbs go limp. A few moments of this horrible slurping sound. You hear this dull, sickening, hollow sound. The tentacles release. Clarota releases his grip from his head, and the captain falls onto his back. Giant, bloodied hole in the center of his skull.
He ate his brain!
I guess you should have left the hammer, shouldn't you?
They loot the bodies, they get some magical gear off of the general, including the flaming warhammer he had in the last episode, and they start tearing some pieces of armor off of the Boulette's body. Boulet? I don't know. And then they hear horns and bells going off in the war camp around them. They have to cast spells and wild shape and everything they did to get over here all again, and they start flying out. Because there are too many of them to fit on the flying carpet, they have to go into wild shape and cast spells and do everything they did on the way over, but, in reverse. So Keyleth casts Pass Without a Trace, they all have a +10 to stealth, and then she picks up the 2 gnomes. Tiberius casts Fly on Grog because he is far too heavy to fit on the flying carpet. Everyone else gets on the carpet, and this trio of flying entities heads out of the barracks. But the stealth rolls are not enough, and so the duergar start throwing javelins at the party. The javelins knock Keyleth out of her wild shape, and so the people on the carpet have to sweep underneath her and catch Keyleth and the gnomes. But now it's moving kind of slow because it's too heavy, and they're all weighing it down. Tiberius tries to catch them with another spell, but because of that, he loses concentration on Fly, so Grog falls. The party hits the ground at the edge of the duergar war camp, and Scanlan and Percy get knocked unconscious. So the twins feed them some healing potions, and everyone starts to run. They get to the tunnel leading further down into the Underdark, but Clarota is trailing behind them a little bit. A crossbow bolt pierces through him, and it's starting to look like he might not be able to reach the party. But the party helps him out. Tiberius casts a spell that gets Clarota to him faster, and then Keyleth seals up the tunnel once Clarota is safely alongside them. They take some more potions, they cast some healing spells, and then they continue. They find an older section of the war camp before the camp had moved forward to its current position. There are 2 tunnels leading out, and they start to debate, and they start to try to figure out what they should do, and then Grog just picks one and goes. And they find one of Kima's old campsites, plus evidence that there were some other people with her, and some evidence of a commotion. Again, Vox Machina seals off the cave, and they rest for the night. Percy takes the night to tinker a little bit, and he makes an explosive arrow for Vex. Partway through the night, they hear some footsteps on the other side of the wall that they've sealed up. Duergar looking around, trying to figure out where the party went. But the party rolls well on their stealth this time, thank goodness, and the Duergar move on. They take a rest, and they resume their journey, and Pike shares the final stop of her vision, the vision she saw of the pathway they need to take to reach the end of their journey. She hadn't gotten a chance to share the final details. There was a cavern of blue crystal and a ruined city in a fungal forest, an ancient city of marble and jade. And Clarota confirms, yes, that is Yug Varil. That is where the Mind Flayers live.
The prettiest was into a cavern of blue crystal, where a fungal fortress, sort of entwined an ancient city of marble and jade.
Sounds really shitty.
The blue
Sounds
gemstones look valuable.
amazing. That doesn't
As you mentioned that night, Clarota kind of nods and says,
That's where the colony resides.
Your colony.
Oh, a great city. In which of those places? In the
fungals?
amongst the ruins of jade and glass.
Is that where we should go?
Surrounded by a forest.
That's Yog Varil?
Deep below Yogg-Bar. That is where the temple resides, where Kavan holds the Elder Brain.
This is where we need to go, I'm assuming.
He sounds like a real fun guy.
Oh, God.
Trip him again. Just trip him again. Trip him again.
So I bet the fortress...
make a will saving throw.
Oh my
What is
God.
that, wisdom?
Yes.
Well.
You feel a mental slap as Clarota glares at you from across the tunnel.
There'll be none of that. My presence.
I got bitch slapped.
Hate puns.
Noted.
As they walk, they see two ogres wheeling a cart-like object with something inside. They spring an attack on the ogres, and they do a lot of damage. Vax instant kills one of them. Vex's arrow, the exploding one, almost kills the other, who barely makes it to his turn. But then an ooze, a black pudding, emerges from the cart. Vex hits it with a lightning arrow, and the odds that that is the first attack that goes into the ooze, it's so funny. Because lightning damage causes a black pudding to split in two. Grog runs up and takes about 20 points of damage from attacking the ooze directly. And then both oozes strike him on their turns.
20 versus armor class
That'll hit.
and a 21 versus armor class.
That'll hit too.
All right. Both of the creatures, they up next to you. These pseudopods kind of come billowing out, slamming into you with the force of an extremely thick, heavy battering ram.
Oh.
Both hit you for, let's see here.
Broken their glass casket.
One hits you for 12 points of damage.
Good.
The other hits you for 14 points of damage.
Good.
Remember, you're raging, so that's halved.
Oh, half both of those?
Yeah.
Awesome.
However, both impacts slamming into your body, the leftover sludge begins to eat away and corrode the flesh upon impact. You take from both sides non-halved, because it is not slashing, bludgeoning, or piercing damage. You take a total of 56 points of acid damage
What? What?
from both slams.
Throg's unconscious.
I'm not.
Double that, or that?
No, that, from both sides. 28 from each.
Oh, and then Clarota fires a lightning bolt because, according to Matt, Clarota did not have a good line of sight and did not see what happened. So, another black pudding splits. Oh, and then two hook horrors drop down from the ceiling.
At this point in time now, the loud ruckus has been clearing through this tunnel.
Shit.
You hear
No, I'm not an upper Hulk.
Is it another one
a
of those?
pair of clacking sounds, and you instinctively look up in the ceiling and you see two large creatures clinging to the ceiling, scurrying across with these strange hooked hands, before both immediately leap down from the ceiling.
Are you freaking kidding
What are
me?
those? What is that?
He's trying to kill us.
Grog tries to pick up Pike and run, but ends up taking like 60 points of acid damage, and he goes unconscious. The fight continues, they manage to do their deed, destroy the creatures. Keyleth gets the final kill on one of the Hook Horrors. Hook Horrors. Also, this encounter was voted on by the viewers of Critical Role, as was the Bulette fight from the last episode. I forgot to mention that. They heal Grog, and then they investigate, and they determine that these black puddings were probably part of another experiment, much like the other monsters that have been coming up from underneath and attacking Craghammer. Monsters likely to be used in a full invasion force. They keep following the tunnel, and it loops back to the ravine underneath where the bridge used to be, and they realize, oh, Trinket's right up there. We can just go up and get Trinket. So they're kind of back where they started, but now they know they just need to double back and take the other tunnel. And now they have Vex's animal companion with them, so all's well that ends well. And that's the episode. So let's dig into the lesson. After the interrogation, which plays off of the lessons we talked about in the second episode of this series, the intro of this episode goes into an extremely tense sequence. And we're going to talk a little bit about how Matt runs a scene like this. But before we do, a bit of a disclaimer. I don't like to rank things on this channel as being a beginner's Dungeon Master's technique or an advanced technique, because as far as I'm concerned, that's really subjective. I've had friends whose first campaigns blew me away with advanced techniques, and others who've DM'd for years that don't seem to grasp things that I consider to be pretty basic. So it's not as simple as all that. However, this thing is hard to get right, and I feel that you need your players to have some trust in you as a DM before you attempt this. Honoring the choices of 7 players in a chaotic scene like this is hard, and if something they say doesn't get fully acknowledged by you, they have to have enough trust that you didn't ignore them, you just didn't happen to catch that detail, or misunderstood them. The party is in the middle of an enemy war camp, and the enemy soldiers definitely know something happened. So bells and horns start ringing out. Now the party wants to sneak out, and with Pass Without a Trace giving them all a +10, that's very possible. But it's also somewhat unlikely that a flying carpet and a giant eagle and a flying Goliath would not necessarily be noticed by everyone who is in the war camp and who know that something happened in this specific building. Like, you're really just rolling the dice to see if someone happens to look up. So the DC for their stealth checks is 20, which is pretty high, but they have a +10 to their stealth, so really, it's a DC 10. They all have a slightly better than average chance of getting that, not even counting what bonuses they might apply, but they don't all succeed. And while at this point in the campaign, Matt still oscillates between counting everyone's rolls individually and one failure means everyone failed, and a system for group checks that he uses a lot more often later on in the series, in this particular case, one failure would be very difficult for the others to counterbalance. So I think it makes sense that honestly one person rolling under a 10 would kind of blow the whole situation. And then duergar start throwing javelins. And Matt does something smart here. He doesn't roll for initiative. There's a lot of really good reasons for that. First, rolling initiative against an entire war camp would be really aggravating. If he rolls one initiative roll representing all of the duergar soldiers, then once the duergar take their first turn, every member of Vox Machina gets a chance to act before any duergar can react to it. And that's boring and undramatic. On the other hand, if Matt breaks the duergar up into battalions and rolls individual initiatives for groups of 5 or 10, it's a lot more stuff for him to track. And God forbid he even consider rolling initiative for each individual duergar, of which there are 30 to 40. Like, that was never on the table. This leads us to the second reason he did not do this. Initiative would move too slowly. This sequence is meant to feel like a tense escape. It's a chase where the party is just ahead of a wave of overwhelming odds. And taking turns would slow that process down, especially with a party of 8. 9 if you include Clarota. I've started to suspect that this is also one of the reasons why the chase rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide just don't seem to work in practice. They take a concept that ultimately does not mix particularly well with the initiative system and try to conform it into that system, and it's not particularly good at it. The third and final reason is something that really has to be its own video another day, because it's a complicated subject. But to make a long video short, if you roll for initiative, you put the idea into the party's head that winning a fight is possible. It's more complicated than that, but essentially that is the effect initiative often has on players. So by not rolling initiative, he makes it less likely that one party member might stay behind and try to fight off a few soldiers because they feel like they can get away with it. Which is good, because they could not get away with that. The party could not handle that. They barely handled this. So how does Matt manage all of this? I mean, if he doesn't roll initiative, does he do a skill challenge? Like from 4th edition? No, he'll do something like that another time. Definitely that will pop up during the course of Critical Role, but that's not what's happening here. No, he's doing something that he does a lot with this group, especially in the home games. He did it in the very first game they ran together, the one-shot for Liam's birthday.
So as you guys run forward, another one slams up in front of you, and you look across the way and you see that there's a pattern to some ones that are rising faster and slower, and both of you go, oh, left, right, and you kind of like make a quick little eye motion, and you both...
Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty.
You got it.
Okay.
Jump. You manage to catch on one side, your foot slips on one corner, and you start to lean forward one that starts coming upward towards you.
Okay.
You grab the back of his armor and pull him back.
You are fucking heavy!
Skims the front of your face.
Oh, shit.
At which point, you guys make it to the fountain, and you can now see the fountain itself. There's water up top, and it's draining out into a small pool, and the pool itself seems to have some sort of weighted mechanism in it.
He did it when Allura's tower collapsed around them.
So, Rob, you're leaping on this platform. It's not shoving. It's not budging at all.
Never bloody mind!
Percy takes his gun, puts it against the turquoise crystal, and fires.
Oh, God.
The ringing of the blast echoes throughout the chamber. It blends with another lurch as you have another piece of rock come slamming into the platform. As the turquoise crystal shatters, the platform just drops into free fall.
And he does it here. He doesn't roll initiative, he just keeps describing actions and asking the players what they want to do. But then he keeps jumping in with new developments, keeping things moving. We see this happen before they even leave the building. He says they hear bells, and Vex suggests they all put on the armor of these fallen duergar. Presumably this would have involved all of them walking out as duergar, pulling the old stormtrooper trick. But then Matt immediately describes that they start hearing war horns. And his message to the party is clear. You don't have time for that.
But then you start hearing bells going off.
Shit.
Okay.
What do I see? I'm still on the roof.
You don't see anything yet. You just hear bells starting to go off into the city.
Should we we should all put on black armor.
We should
Does
get
that
out of
matter?
here. Keela,
You start hearing horns.
Let's go. Let's get out.
To free those doors.
Big horns. You start seeing torches being
Stealth.
We need to get out.
And then he sends the clearest signal he can. He changes the music.
And we're all on the carpet?
Yeah, carpet's away. But this guy's flying?
Yes.
Flying grog.
I am? I thought we were all... Okay.
No, you can't.
What are we doing? Are we getting
We're going up. Straight up.
up and out?
The group explains how they're leaving, but he misunderstands a few details. He doesn't hear that Grog is taking the gnomes and not Keyleth, for example. And again, that's natural, especially with this many players, and a still not insignificant amount of crosstalk. He declares that everyone who failed their stealth check by getting less than 20 is targeted by 3 javelins from the duergar. That's certainly not an accurate count for the number of duergar in the camp. There would definitely be far more. But also, not all of them would be close enough to throw javelins. So before the party can start to debate and ask how many of them are actually that close to them and who actually happens to have the javelins ready, he just declares 3 for each, and that feels pretty fair. Now, Tiberius had said he was casting Fireball at the same time as the Javelin, so Matt resolves that. He has the damage get rolled and says that 12 duergar die, and then he asks the party where they're going.
However, as the javelins strike all you guys, a moment later, there's a gargantuan an explosion as a flash of reddish light from below. A giant, fiery, blooming explosion bursts in the center of that area. You can see duergar thrown left and right. You managed to take out about 12 of them in that one blast. You guys continue cresting over the top. You can now see more and more starting to gather. The bells are going off, the horns are blowing hard. You can see a bunch of them are now running over to what looks like some of the siege equipment they had constructed, which includes a few large ballistae.
I think we should friggin' dive bomb towards the far tunnel past this warcamp. He's fine. He's hiding out. They don't know he's here.
They give an answer. They tell him which cave they want to go toward, and then he says, okay, well, because you killed 12 duergar, the people who rolled low are only going to get 2 javelin attacks this time instead of 3. You see how he's doing this. He presents a question or a problem to the players, then he resolves what they tell him, and then he jumps back to the villains, or to the environmental effect, or to whatever is developing around them. In between declaring the first volley of javelins and the second, only 3 minutes pass at the table.
Dive bomb. I take hold of the front of the carpet and steer it down towards the up and over along the roof and then down towards the tunnel. I'm steering the carpet.
You guys coming down, you basically, you shot up, curved around, and you're going backwards towards the barracks. As you do, another volley of another volley comes to the guys who were under stealth.
Who's not stealth?
However, there's one attack less each because of the duergar that you had taken out. So against Keyleth, 1 hits. You take 12 points of piercing damage.
I am no longer an eagle.
Oh my god.
All right,
Shit, really?
a 2 and a 1 versus Percy.
Yeah.
This time, Keyleth gets knocked out of her eagle form because she takes too much damage, and now almost everyone at the table is jumping in with how they'd like to try to solve the problem. And one thing that happens is that Vax says he grabs a rope and jumps off the carpet to grab Pike. And a bunch of other players start to chime in as well, but Matt stops them. He cuts them all off. Maybe they want to help, or maybe they want to offer suggestions or ask questions, but it doesn't matter. Liam has made a choice that can't just be narrated, it has to be resolved with a roll. And everything that happens next resolves not on what he said he wanted to do, but on the outcome of the roll. So he cuts everyone off, and then Vax has to roll. The same thing happens with Tiberius's concentration, which is going on at the same time. He has to resolve that as well. So he resolves the rolls for Vax's jump, Tiberius's concentration, and then he announces that Grog is falling.
You're just plummeting through the air like a rock because you're in full plate armor.
A twine and try to lasso one of them?
Because I'm really...
You'd have to pull it out of the bag of holding and then turn into a lasso. That's going to take you a full minute.
I have
You
a
don't
rope.
time.
I let go of the front of the carpet. I put one end of the rope in my sister's hand and I jump off towards Pike.
I grapple onto her to hold her
I
down.
have so much armor.
All right, guys.
Okay.
Guys. So here's what happens. In the time this has transpired, you've rushed underneath with the magic carpet. All of you barely managed to hold on as both Pike and Scanlan and Kith all slam into the top of the...
Oh, okay. Except you're
You lost your
dangling
concentration,
down
so
right
glacial
now.
blast didn't go off.
We slam
Thankfully,
in-
that would have been really bad.
We slam into the top of what?
Us.
You guys slam under the top of the rest of the group
That's too many
in there.
people on the carpet.
Because you lost your concentration, your flight spell also dissipates. Grog is now plummeting. The flying carpet now has too much weight and is currently giving out.
Tiberius is the only member of the party who's trying to get to Grog and save him. See, guys? I could say nice things about Tiberius. But considering how far the carpet had fallen away from Grog and what Tiberius was trying to do, Matt essentially says that it's not possible, especially given Tiberius's role is just not high enough to justify it. And after Tiberius tried to help and failed, Matt declares that Grog has hit the ground.
Featherfall gets to you just in time. Your descent slows. In that time, Grog has impacted.
Grog!
We're gonna hit. I'm shielding the
I'm
healer.
shielding Scanlan.
As I said earlier, the party crash lands and Percy and Scanlan both get knocked unconscious from the damage they take hitting the ground. But Matt still rules that they are on the far end of the war camp and not all the duergar are right on top of them. This is what I mean when I say that Matt, as a dungeon master, is tough but fair, because these two moments come back to back.
Yoon and Scanlan both take 36, which put Scanlan into negative as well because he was not at...
No, he was fully healed.
Nope.
No, he wasn't. So, you all tumble end over end, come to rest.
We just crash landed at a war camp.
Yeah. On the far end of it, thankfully.
There is a moment here where he seems to make a decision on behalf of one of the party members, and then he thinks better of how he presented it and he rephrases what he's trying to say.
So as you guys are running towards the back, towards the main tunnel, which you can now see, it's roughly a 40 by 30 foot tunnel. You go running through the buildings. You see a few duergar kind of poke out from the
Can we
buildings.
stealth while we're doing this, or we're too late?
No, you guys are just bolting at this point. You're not even concentrating on stealth right now. Plus, with the group coming, you basically a few of you would stealth and the rest would be left in the dust. So you're just kind of all pushing for speed at this point.
Because honestly, that's one of the biggest pitfalls of this technique. It's very easy to accidentally make decisions for the party. But with very few exceptions, Matt is very good about avoiding that in this scene. And one of the only examples where he did so, he noticed it and course corrected immediately. And just as the party reaches the tunnel, Matt does something that I fail to do almost every time an NPC is traveling with the party. He remembers the NPC exists.
As you guys are doing this and rushing in, you're realizing there's one member of your party that you haven't had a lot of time with that you didn't think about to this moment. You now see kind of like floating via levitation ability about 30 feet away, slowly descending towards you as you're putting up the wall of stone.
And this is a fascinating moment because, look, the party in this moment has every opportunity to leave Clarota behind. They've just seen him eat another brain if they needed a reminder of what sort of a dangerous creature he is. And they have a good deal of information they didn't have before. They could cut their losses. But Matt's dramatic instincts are good, because by having Clarota trail behind them, he puts the party in a position where they are forced to make a decision, to either wait for Clarota or cover their tracks and run.
2 bolts go firing towards him. One whooshes overhead. A second one through his back, out the front of his chest, off the shoulder.
Come on!
You can see now, and the bolt itself is about 4 feet long, made of kind of this long, jagged, pointed arrow tip. Clarota begins to falter and begins to hover towards you, almost like trying to swim through the air in your direction.
Can I try to rescue him?
He's about 20 feet from you now. You can try and reach out and put your hands towards him.
Now I cast Glacial Blast right under him like a slide right towards us. And catch him.
Okay. With eyes kind of lulling, Clarota comes down and hits the edge of the slide and almost loses consciousness at that moment, sliding through the ice. You guys manage to capture, grabbing his arms, lift him to his feet.
And now Wall of Stone.
And of course, they choose to wait for Clarota, because they really like and trust him. Whether or not they should. That does it for this week's episode, but we will be back in 2 weeks with another installment of Critical Role Demystified. We're going to cover episode 6, Breaching the Emberhold. For those who want to know whether they should watch along, this next episode is fine, but the final 20 minutes are the best part of the episode, and possibly one of the best parts of this whole Craghammer Underdark arc, at least from my perspective. And that is what we're going to be spending most of that episode discussing. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe and hit the bell to see more videos. I put out new videos every Monday and Thursday. Let me know in the comments your thoughts about this episode and about this technique. Have you ever tried something like this at your table? Did it go well or did it go poorly? I could definitely see it going either way. And if you want to hang out and talk about more stuff, not just D&D, but a lot of D&D, we have a Discord server. The link for that is in the doobly-doo below. Come check it out and hang out with a really cool community. And if you want to help support the channel another way, please consider joining the Patreon. There's a link for that in the description below, and it's the most tangible way you can show your support for the channel and help keep it running. Also, I haven't talked about this at all, but I have a newsletter on my website. If you want to sign up, I will send out occasional updates of things that I think are cool and that might be helpful. So check that out. Until next time, play fair and have fun.